To those people who found out their parent had a second secret family, how did you discover the truth? What happened afterwards? Kinda the opposite. My bio dad has, as far as I know, kept me a secret from the rest of his family for 23 years. Pretty sure I have 3 half siblings who are all 10-20 plus years older than me. It's kinda wild when I think about it, but I typically don't. This happened to my wife's grandmother. She's still alive, in her 90s, and her father had a secret second family. They met at his funeral. When the secret wife saw the life this man had built and lived with his public wife, the secret wife said, "I always knew there was someone else, but I didn't know that I was the someone else." That is so sad. Sad. Well, my wife has recently found out she has at least 8 half siblings. Apparently another sibling did the 23andMe test and made her results public or something. One of the unknown half siblings had done the same, and voila. This happened to my wife's friend. The father was a fireman and his 2 daughters lived down the block. It turns out he had a second family, also with 2 daughters a few blocks away. The second woman knew he had a wife and kids, but they never told their daughters. The fireman did one of those safety talks in school and gave a hug to one of the daughters from the second family before he left. My wife's friend witnessed her father hugging a girl in another class and asked about it at dinner. Things went downhill from there. Not mine, but a friend from work told me this story. Her sister married this guy who turned out to be having about 3 affairs. When she gave birth to their first son, the guy's mistress also gave birth about 2 weeks after. The idiot decided to name both of his sons the same first name. They both shared his second name. So about 3 years later his wife goes to get the birth certificate for her son and the lady in the office gives her the one which belongs to the mistress's son, which is how she found out about the whole situation. They're divorced now and it turned out he guy has 11 children with 5 different women. Sort of. So growing up we would take trips to see my father's mom. I don't call her grandmom because she is a C, in Florida, and there was always this old man with her. I asked my dad if that was his dad and he said no, his dad died in World War II, and this old guy was her husband. I was about 8 at this time. Fast forward to 1995, I was 16 and we go to a family reunion and I remember seeing my dad very angry and upset, but he didn't say anything that day. When we got back from the family reunion, I heard my mom and dad talking about what happened. Apparently my dad was talking to one of his distant relatives and said he wished he had a chance to know his dad before he died. Well, the relative said, "Your dad isn't dead. I spoke to him last month. He lives in New Mexico." So my dad had asked if she would give him his phone number and she declined, but she said she would give him his address and my dad could write him a letter. If he got a response, great. If not, he had to promise to leave it alone. Well, my dad wrote his letter and few months later he received a phone call from his father. My dad was 38 years old and finally got to hear his father's voice. My dad booked a flight out to meet him the next day. My mom told my dad his dad died in World War II and told my grandfather she had a miscarriage. So both of them never knew each other were alive. When my father's mom found out he had made contact with his dad, she became furious and didn't speak to our family for about 10 years. My dad asked me if I wanted to go to his mom's funeral and I declined. But I did go to his father's funeral 2 years ago because he was a good man and a great grandfather. Edit. My grandfather was married with 4 kids and 15 grandkids to his wife in NM, and his wife I call grandmom to this day. Well, this story wins the prize. Rip my heart out and stomp that sucker flat. My husband was having an affair with a friend of the family. I didn't know that the friend's youngest child was my husband's until he was 7 years old. I was his babysitter when he was an infant and I discovered it through years of inconsistency that made me wonder, and I confronted him. Within a few months he came clean and left. It caused a lot of damage. We divorced and he married her. I later married the husband of my dreams. One that's faithful. Married 16 years now. There is life after misery. After reading so many heavy stories on this thread, your happy ending made me so happy. I'm so proud of you for having the strength to face what was happening and move on. And I'm so glad that you got the husband of your dreams in the end. Found out my dad had a daughter after my parents divorced. I was an only child and it happened when I was 2. When I was 18, looking at his tax return for college financial aid, it showed a girl's name as a dependent. I never asked him about it until a few years back when she contacted me on Facebook asking if I was her brother. My cousin's dad, my uncle by marriage, had a secret family. He worked in Houston during the week and came home to the family in Harlingen, TX on the weekend. It was kind of always a family joke between my cousins and her siblings. You know, like wouldn't it be funny if dad actually had a secret family and that's why he's never here? Then they found out it was true. A wife and 3 kids, just like my cousin. Very similar ages. The two families had almost identical lives. My uncle had been married the whole time to both my aunt and this other lady. Everyone thought it was some sick joke when they found out. But nope. I had a friend in high school who started dating this girl that had the same last name as him. Turns out she was his half sister and his dad was raising 2 families he kept secret from each other. Not me, but my friend's mom had a DNA test done and the results said she had a ton of siblings and cousins, which is weird because she had one brother, another adopted brother and no cousins. Turns out her mom was having trouble getting pregnant, so she went to see some really well-renowned specialists and then became pregnant. But all this doctor did was take some of the husband's sperm and mix it with his own and then they would get pregnant. So he fathered a ton of children, many of whom probably still don't know. OMG, something similar happened in the Netherlands. Via 23andMe or something, there kept popping up people who were related to the same guy, and when that dude turned out to be a fertility doctor they went to check and he had fathered over 150 kids at least. Very disturbing. This happened to my best friend's mom. This is interesting, as they were the secret family. My best friend's father passed away when he was young. His mother, who owned a business at the time, was raising her 2 kids a year apart. While they weren't struggling, her business was unable to grow since she had to pay herself so much to keep care of the kids. A few years later she runs into her high school sweetheart, and they re-establish connection and eventually start dating. He has 2 kids, near the same age as both of hers. His wife had passed away a year prior, and he works as a regional manager for a very large, very profitable company, so he was rich and sad. He eventually helped them buy a house under her name, which was previously owned by an average paid NFL player, with bedrooms for both set of kids. He bought her a boat. He bought her a car. You name it. With his purchases, she was able to reinvest capital into her business and it took off fairly well. 2 or 3 years go by, and she's able to afford much nicer things by herself. Around junior year of my friend's HS, around 3 years, things got even more serious and she starts asking to get married. My friend's sister viewed him as her dad, practically. Never called him that, though. I jokingly called them mom and dad because I spent a good deal of the summer at their house. She knew about his 2 kids, but the 2 kids did not know about them. However, after 3 years he still had never told his kids about his secret family. He explained to them that he was traveling, even during week-long cruises. This continued for another 2 years despite her nagging. He justified as saying he wanted all the kids to graduate high school. This past Christmas, after 5 years, everyone had graduated high school. My friend's mom had had enough. She dug into his friends' lives and they eventually told her that he was still married, his wife was still alive. My friend's mom kept her house and several other things he had bought under her and her kids' name. Her business is now in a great spot and easily provides for her kids' college. This man had 2 full families and spoiled both of them rotten, and kept it a secret for 5 years. I'm still sorry that happened to your friend. It's interesting that he maintained both families and was successful in promoting their quality of life. That said, it must have been a mental and emotional toll on both families as well. My mother had me and my brother before she knew my father had a real family, so technically, we were the secret family, but we have a pretty good relationship with him despite that. Then a week ago, my mother and I visited the college I'll be attending this fall. In the middle of the 2-hour trip to the university, out of the blue she told me that the father I know is not my real father, just my brother's. Turns out she had an affair and had me with another man while they were still together. I met the man once when I was 9. He randomly, but now I know, not so randomly, gave me a birthday gift after just meeting me. Turns out, he has a family of his own with I think 3 kids and a wife. They know nothing about me, and I wanted to stay that way. My mother also told me that he sends us money every month for my expenses. but I have no idea what dear old mom does with it since she doesn't give me an allowance and my father, brother's biological dad, pays for most of our bills. I cried for about an hour in the car after she told me, and all she said to me then was stop crying. It changes nothing. I didn't speak to her during the tour nor on the way home, and now she's continuing to act like nothing happened and everything's normal. My brother and father have no idea, and I still don't understand why she told me then or why she said anything at all. TLDR, my family is my father's secret family, but I'm actually the product of a different affair, so I'm technically part of two secret families. I'm sorry. After my parents' 10th year anniversary church wedding, someone called the church registrar saying that she was the legal wife. The secretary from the registrar proceeded to call my mom to inform her about it. My mom did investigations on her own a full week after the event, and eventually found out that my dad now has a daughter with his mistress, and has been staying with them 5 days in a week. His excuse was always work is hectic, so I might as well stay at someone's place. Yeah right, lol. Mom decided to break the relationship. Annulment is expensive from where we live. Divorce is being discussed in the Supreme Court, and the whole family was in chaos. Grandparents, father's side, wanted custody of 4 of us, me and my 3 brothers, but we fought till they gave up because we saw how distraught our mom was and she only had us for support. Our aunt and grandma were living a bit far from where we were. They had a final meeting, asking why my dad decided to cheat for the nth time. He said, because I am a weak man and you are too trusting, so I decided to cheat on you again. A few years later he decided to take away our educational plans and life savings because of gambling addiction. His parents were holding it for us that time because brothers and I were still minors. He forged their signatures and was able to encash all of it. So, yeah, 15 years after that, we barely have contact with him. But we know he has a new family again. We actually saw him again during my second brother's funeral 2 years ago. Didn't communicate as much. Mom is doing okay. Brothers and I are doing okay. Just have terrible trust issues. Welcome to the Philippines, where annulment is not affordable and divorce is not an option. Yet, I am supportive of the divorce bill. Ongoing discussion, as I have seen various women and men suffer from being left by their partners due to abuse, neglect, being cheated on, etc., and they are forced to accept that it's how their life will be. I would have trust issues too if I found something like that out. Hope everything's alright now. OP. I'm the second secret family. My dad was married and had 4 sons. He really wanted a daughter and his wife couldn't have any more kids. He met my mom at work and they started seeing each other and they had me all while my dad was still married. The weird thing is he never really kept me secret. I've always known his now ex-wife, who I also call mom because half the time she was helping raise me, and I know all my siblings. None of us are very close, but I know who they are and I see them every once in a while. My dad and his ex-wife got divorced the same year my mom broke up with him. This was when I was 10, but my dad and stepmom, I'll call her, still live in the same house because my dad has some health issues. They were staying together for the kids, which just made everything worse. My mom hates my stepmom and dad and almost didn't come to a bunch of things when I was a senior in high school because they would both be there. My stepmom tries to be civil with my mom, but my mom refuses to be nice to her, even though she didn't do anything wrong. It really all just fricked up our family and no one is close to me or my parents. My brothers hate my dad more than I ever have. The whole wanting a daughter thing didn't work out too well for him considering we aren't close because he fricked everyone over in the process. Not a second family, but a secret job. We thought my mom was a secretary at a school district 25 miles away. Turns out she was working as a lumberjack. She often came home smelling of pine or fir, but we couldn't figure out why. Then I found her 48 inches chainsaw extension hidden in the attic of our garage. It was kind of a shock for us all. My dad was an abusive frick towards my little sister, my mom, and I growing up, and just made things very hard for us, but treated us with lots of trips to the mall and vacations to make up for the abuse. Then slowly the vacations stopped, then the shopping sprees, and he would randomly come home late from work at weird times, but he has always had flexible hours so it wasn't too off. Then one day my mom got a weird feeling and followed him out when he said he was going to get a drink with friends and found him with his fiancée and her kid at a restaurant. After that he basically abandoned us and left us homeless. But it just hurt a lot knowing how well he treated his fiancée compared to my mom and how much he respected the other woman. And he treated her kid better than us too emotionally, which was a huge frick you to all of us. Really fricked us all up for a while. This is horrible, but just remember that just because he wasn't abusing them in public doesn't mean he wasn't at home. That may have been what you looked like when he was still spending money to apologize for your abuse. I don't know if that helps. I hope you and your family are doing okay. A lady I used to work with met her husband's wife at the funeral. It was pretty traumatic. She also found out shortly thereafter that he liked to look at pictures that should have gotten him arrested. She was never really the same. Sounds like a scumbag in more ways than one. How the heck does someone split their time for something like that? Like, what's his excuse for not being there? Do they blame work? Do they do a week at one home and a week at the other, or split every other day with the other family? So many questions. Not really a secret family, but I found out my dad had a secret daughter. My mom and I knew her and thought she was just my cousin. Turns out my dad had an affair with his brother's wife. So she was kind of my sister and my cousin at the same time. She just showed up one day saying she came to visit and gave my dad a letter she had written. I never read it myself, but it was apparently very emotional, saying she hated knowing she was lying everyone. My mom didn't seem to be affected by it much, but my parents got divorced a year later. I think my uncle, who though she was his daughter the whole 19 years, took it the hardest. Growing up in Jamaica, it was kind of normal for a man to have a second family. I was probably 5 years only when I realized my mother, my sister and I were that second family. My father was always around so it didn't feel like a secret or a shame. All my life I've known my dad's ex-wife. She accepted my sister and I. We called her Auntie Sylvia and she called us by our names. Loved us and kissed us goodbye whenever we left her house. This was normal. One day I left my backpack at her house and Auntie Sylvia called my mother to let her know. I was in the other room when my mother hung up and rushed to call her friends to gossip about the call. She was surprised how nice Auntie Sylvia was to her, knowing about her and his kids. I later asked my mother if she didn't like Auntie because she didn't think she was nice. She sat me down and explained that Auntie was really Daddy's wife and that was that. Years later my dad and Auntie divorced and since then he's been married to my mother. This kind of always fricked me up, knowing my mother was the other woman, but knowing she got her man in the end. The dad of a friend of mine died when he was 14 years old. 2 families showed up at the funeral. Guy had 2 wives and 5 kids total. No one knew anything. It was a huge shock and it messed up everyone involved basically. Many years later my friend is close and has a good relationship with his half siblings, but his mom and sisters never really got over it and pretend they don't exist. I was visiting my aunt and uncle and they had a secret family of dogs they adopted from the shelter. Needless to say we were delighted. It was 2 golden retrievers and their puppy. I think my cousins named them something sequential like Uno dos tres. Pretty short during the Dora era. Whoever gilded me is now blessed with encounters with good bois forever. That is the absolute best type of secret. I wish more people had secrets like that. My father had a second family. When I was little kid my father was away a lot because he was in the military. He deployed and while deployed hooked up with another soldier and she got pregnant. Daddy came back and lived with mum after that like nothing was wrong, but he started to have to go away a lot for training and mum got suspicious and found out there was no training, he was just staying at her house. She knew about us and didn't care and thought it was okay. In fact she tried to talk to my mum about sharing him. He dipped out after that and we never really saw him again. 20 years later mum has a nice wife and live in the country and have a nice quiet life. That was a really nice plot twist. Glad she ended up happily married. I found out my stepdad fathered a child when he was a teenager and his parents were originally supportive but eventually swept it under the rug because my stepdad didn't want to be a father. Apparently everyone in the family in town knew, just kept their mouth shut. I found out about all of this years and years later when my mom brought it up during an argument. Apparently the kid, who is now in his late 20s or early 30s, he's a few years older than me, has made several attempts to meet my stepdad, but my stepdad still wants nothing to do with him. We all kinda pretend it never happened and don't mention anyone named Jordan around him. Your stepdad sounds like an butthole. Not a secret family, as far as I know, but my dad got caught having multiple affairs with a few addicts, which is strange because we're a upper middle class suburban family. He would always be leaving for emergency work calls, bailing the women out of jail. My mom found a random diamond necklace and couldn't get into their bank account. He had spent over $20,000 on treatment for the other women, so he locked her out of it. My sister finally found text messages, and so did my mother. One of the women was 3 years older than my sister and the other was my mom's age. The younger woman overdosed and died, but the other is still obsessed with my dad and has tried to come to our house. It's been a few years from the first time he was caught, and they just now separated after being caught texting the same women multiple times. Your mom needs to get STD screening. This happened to one of my grandaunts. She was in 3rd or 4th grade and it was the first day of school. During roll call they called her name and she and another girl responded. It turned out they both had the same first and last name, different middle names. They became instant friends because of the shared names and started talking about their families. They then realized that their dad also shared the same first name and last name, even middle name, and looked very similar as well. Once my aunt got home and told all this to her mom, all crap broke loose. It turns out that her father had been fathering children around the neighborhood and letting the women use his last name for the baby. I think it came out that he had like 20 children altogether. Mom dragged us all along to come with her to some parking lot. A woman comes out of her parked car. What I later found out was my half-sister. They talk for a while and my mom gives her gifts. She comes back into the car and we're all questioning her as to who that is, and all she gives us is "That's your sister." She wouldn't answer anything else. In the course over a few weeks it turns out I'm the youngest of 7, and aside from my older brother and sister I've lived with all my life, I have 2 older half-sisters and 2 other older half-brothers who have been kept secret for 24 years. This happened last year and I'm still recovering secrets she's kept from us. We are still recovering from this half-told story. When I was 14 I found out from both of my parents that I had a sister just 6 months younger than me. Apparently my dad had cheated on my mom when she was pregnant with me, but they were able to work things out. I was pissed off for a while that they lied to me, but I get it now. No one in my family met her or had a relationship with her until I was 18 and decided that she should fly out to visit us. I'm glad we did that, because now we all have peace of mind. She comes out once a year to visit now. Not technically a secret family because he didn't spend time with her, but a secret kid. Well, not really a secret family, but I was adopted with my half-sister. Turns out we are a secret. Literally no one alive but birth mom and her mother know she had 2 babies. Kind of blows my mind. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.